No longer am I talking about backward compatible games. This time we are going into a game that has actually been updated for next gen, Dirt 5. So Dirt 5 is a racing game from Codemasters. They have upgraded it for the next gen hardware, specifically for Xbox Series X.
Oh yeah? What's that?
So Microsoft and Codemasters sent me this game this past week, and I finally had a chance to, try a next-gen game. And my overall takeaway is right in line with my expectations. The barrier to creating a really good-looking game is no longer the hardware that you're running it on.
His bodega was robbed. Hope I can help.
We have hit a point of extreme diminishing returns in terms of visuals. This game looks a lot like the games we were playing on Xbox One X and PlayStation 4 Pro, and I don't think that's going to change much. So when it comes to the kinds of games we're going to get on these consoles, for the most part, they're going to look a lot like what they have been looking like, because that barrier was also the barrier on last gen, and it's not going away. You'll get a third choice in Dirt 5's graphics settings, and that is 120 hertz mode. And I would definitely suggest doing that. So Dirt 5 at 120 hertz on the Series X is smooth, and I think that this kind of brings us to the idea of the magic of consoles that just work. But that's not really what I mean when I say it just works. What actually is impressive is that Dirt 5 on the Series X at 120 hertz really does just stay at a locked 120 frames per second. Almost locked, almost locked, almost locked, almost locked. I flipped a switch, and then it just went 120 hertz solid. Now, I'm sure it's doing dynamic resolution. I'm sure it's doing, it's definitely turning down the graphical quality. I'm sure it's like lowering the overall average resolution. But that's not what I didn't really notice that stuff. What I noticed is the smooth frame rate and just how consistent that frame rate was. You can feel that in the gameplay. If you're someone who just wants to take maximum advantage of their 2160p 120 hertz HDMI 2.1 TV that you just spent a lot of money on, and you have the option of connecting a PC to it or an Xbox Series X to it, just to get the most out of that TV in the least amount of time, to me, I think the Xbox Series X is a no-brainer in that situation. It is like. At least for now. Maybe in a few years, maybe PCs will move so far beyond what these consoles are even doing that, okay, well, you're going to get a much better frame rate or whatever with those PCs. Maybe. But for now, though, no, I would just stick with the console. That's going to do it for me.
Yakuza Like a Dragon, an Xbox Series X launch title that offers multiple ways to tap into its power. Yes, much like our recent preview of Dirt 5, it seems Series X's lineup so far has a trend towards giving players more ways to play.
Having the option in this game already to jump between a 4K 60 or a 4K 30 ray trace mode is exactly the kind of choices that everyone should want.
And that's no bad thing. It also lands on Series X with clear boosts over existing consoles, adding 4K support, offering 60 FPS, and also hastening its loading times. But does it deliver entirely on all fronts? And to what extent is this making the most of Series X for launch?
Don't get caught.
Now, please.
Oh, yes you did.
Interestingly, PS5 is delayed to next year. So for now, it's on the Xbox machines to show the series' use of next-gen specs. As ever for the series, Like a Dragon's world is authentically designed. Post effects are striking, the streak of lens flares across the city lights, the motion blur of attacks in combat. We see screen space reflections on puddles and glass windows, no ray tracing here.
we can get leads on who we're dealing with.
Spider-Man?
Call you soon.
Sorry.
Facial expressions too are exceptional as ever.
Thanks.
Yeah. Of course.
Character skin too, and even hair quality are standout in their realism. Especially for major players like Nanba with his full head of curls. Much of the footage here unfolds on the game's so-called normal mode. On Series X, this has the game render at a native 1440p, which to the best of my testing is fixed in place constantly. The trade-off for not going for a true 4K is everything targets 60 FPS this way.
Now, looking at the footage they've released and doing some pixel count across various points in the trailer, in action and in combat, I'm seeing only 3840 by 2160 every time, fully native 4K.
There's the resolution mode. This is your full fat 4K option, but the sacrifice is, yes, down we go to 30 FPS on Series X.
Here on the PS5 version, we're seeing over 2 times that, 2.25 the pixel fill rate of the PS4 version. So 3.7 up to 8.2 million pixels. That's a vast increase. So over double the fill rate and double the performance. 60 FPS over 30.
And lastly, we have the frame rate mode. This returns us to a fluid 60 FPS, though the resolution drops to a native 1080p in this case.
It offers a full 4K 60 FPS mode and then a 4K 30 FPS mode.
Now, the 1080p frame rate mode exists for a reason. There are occasional drops on normal, always relating to big skill attacks. Expect a few lurches into the 50s during alpha heavy moves, and very rarely much lower. And even in this preview, performance is in a good place.
But if you want to get an idea of what the ray tracing solution will fully look like in the remastered version, just look at Miles Morales.
The high frame rate mode essentially removes all the drops we see during big special attacks. You want 60Hz? You've got it here without any real issue. But the change to 1080p is quite a sacrifice on image quality. But for now, this is as good as we can get. Again, 1080p feels like a step too far when the normal mode already hits 60 well enough most of the time.
Just to have an idea of what's coming, look at what's in the PSN collection, the PlayStation collection titles that are in the PS Now.
Let's look at the high resolution mode. For those buying Series X to primarily see their games run at a native 4K, this is the way to play. The trade-off being we're running at 30 frames per second to get there.
And then you can see here a side-by-side example of the frame rate, the performance between the two versions.
The 30 FPS cap can have issues, and when it does, it makes motion feel less stable than it should do. Again, big skill moves, drop it to the mid-20s, drop it to the mid-20s, drop it to the mid-20s, drop it to the mid-20s. It's not a watertight lock, but it shows Series X can feasibly push to 4K and get away with it. There's no question this is a PS4 Xbox One era title in spirit though.
And many of the titles that we can touch on, this is only the start of the generation and things are already looking very good. I'm desperate to get some hands-on time with the Series X.
Like a Dragon then is making a solid first use of Series X hardware,